Hey, PreSales Collective, it's your host, James Kaikis, and today I'm going to be joined by Chris Craft, technology leader at Docusign. Chris is also the global chair for the Bold ERG at Docusign. The topic of today's episode is stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And the content in this episode is exactly what it sounds like. So you're going to hear Chris's perspective on what staying ready means. Chris has been in the profession for over 2 decades. So how does he stay relevant? How does he make sure he's building relationships with his customers? How does he know and keep his pulse on what's happening in his customers' ecosystem? And how does he focus on being a continuous learner? And as a sneak peek, we actually then start talking about diversity in this profession. And I love hearing Chris's perspective on it. So you will enjoy today's episode. Today's episode is sponsored by Reprise, the leading demo creation platform. With Reprise, your pre-sales teams create, present, and share product demos perfectly customized for each step of your sales motion. Go to reprise.com/starter to try it for free today.
Hi there. My name is Yuji Higashi, co-founder of PreSales Collective, and I have big news to share with you if you're a pre-sales leader or an individual contributor early in your career. We recently launched 2 training and enablement programs aimed at helping you take your career to the next level. Both programs were created by pre-sales leaders with input from dozens of SC veterans across our community. Now, we'll be running cohorts each month, so if you're interested in participating, visit us at presalescollective.com/enablement to submit an inquiry, and we'll send you details about each program, including this curriculum and schedule. We look forward to working with you on growing your career and being part of your career journey. Thank you, and I hope to see you soon.
Chris, welcome to the PreSales Podcast. How are you today?
Doing good. Great, James. How you been?
I'm great. Thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited for today's episode. We're going to get into the topic of stay ready so you don't have to get ready. But I mentioned to you that I'm going to take a little shot at myself because we've been talking about doing this podcast for a couple months since the local Chicago event. I went on my honeymoon, and since I've come back, my schedule's been a little bit all over the place, and I dropped the ball on this. And pretty much the last couple of days, we've been going back and forth on the title and what we're going to actually talk about. But I felt like it was only fitting that we're going to talk about staying ready so you don't have to get ready, because we're pretty much putting a podcast together in a day. So I wanted to highlight that.
That was a great event, by the way, in Chicago.
It was great meeting you there. What'd you think of that local event?
I think it was very necessary to have that human element, right? Because most people work from home, which I love doing, by the way. But I do want to meet people. I like to be around people, have about conversations, not just like one person at a time in Zoom where we're talking all over each other, but, just having interactions and taking away the corporate side and really trying to understand people as a person.
I agree. And I'm glad you had a good interaction. Like you, I work at home now too. I don't have an office. And so I like to joke that these local events are my office. And, you build relationships with people virtually, but there's nothing like the depth that you can get to face to face. So that's why we love local events, and we'll continue to do them as long as we can. So typically I'll ask you about your career journey, but in doing my homework, I have to bring this up. I saw that you were a NASA shuttle engineering. So as you tell us about your career journey, what got you to where you are today, I would love to learn about that experience.
Yeah, that was a unique experience. Funny story, when I graduated, I didn't have a job because it was a downtrend. And I'm from Detroit, Michigan originally. Well, I lived in Detroit at the time. Couldn't find a job. One of my friends told me to go down to North Carolina, which is a HBCU. I literally snuck in the career fair, and I met a person from Lockheed Martin and a person from NASA. And I knew people that worked at the companies, but, just gave my resume, moved on. 2 years later, at that time, I was homeless, working like 10 jobs, living in my car down in Florida, where an opportunity presented itself for me to go into either one of the 2 companies, like Lockheed Martin or NASA. Obviously, I took NASA because once you have that on your name, it's kind of hard to shake. So, and that was kind of like, that was like my intro into the tech field, because that was my first tech. Ironically, my cousin started working there too. So the funny joke in our family is like when people say it's rocket science, we just look at each other like, okay, here we go. She still works there though, so she's way more talented and smarter than me.
I appreciate you sharing that, but you mentioned something pretty important there. You said that you were homeless and working 10 jobs from your car. Talk about that experience and really how it has shaped where you are today.
So one thing I learned about being homeless is like it taught me to really be hungry and humble and get things done. And more importantly, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. Going through that time where I was, homeless, but I was still applying for jobs. I was like getting to know people. I was still going to networking events. So I made sure that I was creating a tight web or a mesh rather, that people knew who I was. They understood the brand that I bring, the value that I bring to the organization. That's how I started getting opportunities.
Appreciate you sharing that. And as we talk about opportunities and your pre-sales career, you've worked at some really great companies. So talk to us about that journey.
I was blessed at NASA. I wanted to get my MBA there. And this company named Cisco Systems had a program called CSAT, the Cisco Sales Associates Program. It's like a derivative of the IBM program that they had back in the day, the one, and I think Microsoft has one too. So got into that program where they had pretty much taught us how to sell for a whole entire year. And then we taught us how to get certifications on various projects. At the time, Cisco was like the number 1 and 2 leader in everything. And it had like over 200 products. So learning that pretty much, let's say going through the gauntlet of learning that, I built a fellowship cohort of people that have graduated from the program also. But it also allowed me to understand a new way of learning, right? That kind of goes back to the conversation, like stay ready to get ready, like always constantly learn because things are going to constantly change and evolve.
So you went from Cisco to Citrix, Zones, Splunk, and now Docusign. Those are some big names there.
Yeah, I guess maybe I had some value to add. But those are, if you think about it, just kind of the stage of technology, that's kind of how it went. You had hardware, then you had like multiple hardware products. Then you talk about cybersecurity, virtualization with Citrix, then cybersecurity with Splunk. And then you think about now that moved to software as a service where you kind of look at Docusign, which is next, right? So it kind of shows you, if you look at my career, the trend of how I was able to stay engage or learn new talent or identify the trends that were coming so I can position myself to move in those great organizations.
I love that perspective, Chris. And one thing I want to highlight too is that you lead the Bold organization over at Docusign. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah, so BOLD stands for Brown Organization Leadership and Development. And that's probably one of the highlights of me working at the organization, is that giving the ability to take my 21 years of experience and give that to individual contributors that are coming into the organization, providing them mentors. Also, at the same time, working with the talent pipeline, right? So one of the things we all know in tech, there's not a lot of Black and brown representation. So working with BOLD and other ERGs, we work to figure out ways to bring and enable people to come into the tech field, similar to what you're doing right now with your organization.
Appreciate that, Chris, and thanks for doing that. So let's talk about today's topic, because we both referenced it a few times. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. What does this topic mean to you, Chris?
It means a couple of different things. First things first, I like to think about like career, right? People have a job, but they really don't think about their careers. Career is the longevity of how long you're going to be within a career. And things change because people's ideas change. The other things like leadership quality, how you have the ability to be ready to lead, because sometimes you're going to lead when you don't really want to, but sometimes, but are you well versed in a topic or a situation where you can take control of the reins and move forward? And that's really key for like engineers nowadays. And then, being a subject matter expert is having the ability to know what trends are coming down the pipeline, obviously to able to add value back to your customer. And at the same time, taking that information, adding value back to your business partner, whether it's your sales business partner, customer success business partner, your RVP, whoever you're aligned with, as a subject matter expert in the field, opposed to just being like what we call like a hired gun, which typically SEs were kind of known for.
I like that perspective, Chris, and I absolutely agree with you. And as you talk about leadership qualities, one of the things that I've utilized in my career, in most places, right, you don't need a title to have influence on an organization. And, so many people want to get into leadership, but don't necessarily have that title. But, you can be a leader and you can be ready to respond to situations that happen within your organization or respond to crisis in a time of need. And I think that's something that really resonated with me that you said.
Yeah, definitely. We think about just kind of, if you're in a terminal situation, my father always told me the cream always rises to the crop, but crop has to be watered and nurtured before it can grow. So that's kind of puts it down to stay ready to get ready. If you're always ready, you don't have to practice or train to get to where you're trying to get to, because you're already there. You just step in and you add value day one.
I like that perspective. And so let's talk about the why. Why is this topic important to you?
So if you think about it, technology is changing. Everybody knows Moore's law, right? So if you think about, again, looking at my resume, just looking at the industry as a whole, Web 3.0 is what's coming, right? Or actually, it's already here. You're thinking about artificial intelligence. You're thinking about machine learning and automation, also cybersecurity. With that being said, we need to have a 3.0 workforce, having the ability to understand the technology trends that are there or what's coming, as well as having the subject matter expertise to tie it back to the impact of the business. Because if you think about sales, there's only two reasons why you're having these conversations: is to help a customer save money or help a customer make money. Other than that, there's no reason to be having the conversation, right?
Helping people do their job better. I like to say that the job of the SC is to help whoever's buying your software be able to hit their bonus, go home and see their family at night, and just be able to be happy in their job. I'm glad you brought up those perspectives. I want to ask you a question, that maybe a situation that you've encountered. Do you have an example of where Stay Ready helped you encounter something that would have been a difficult situation?
Yeah. So being a Docusign, we have a lot of different resellers that leverage our technology. I wouldn't even say resellers. I would say, system integrators that have integrated us into whatever type of package they sell to their customers. One scenario we just won recently was the ability to have a conversation with a retail commercial loan civic platform. I don't need to say their name, but they're pretty big in the industry. However, they were positioning a project that not a lot of people really understood. My ability, because I worked with my partner development managers here at Docusign, who had a relationship with that specific vendor or partner per se, I was able to learn their technology so I could speak eloquently to it and talk about how that's going to help their business and how our solution complements exactly what they're trying to do, which was, at the end of the day, a digital transformation process, which effectively they didn't want any human error. They wanted just kind of a streamlined process. As you know, when humans really get involved, they tend to mess things up. But that allowed us to position and upsell the customer on the solution of Docusign to complement that project that was going on that directly impacted their revenue.
Wow. That was probably a pretty intense sales process, would you say?
It really was, just having the conversations and really understanding the customer's business and having the ability to talk to various different lines of business, because I knew exactly how their roles affected the industry, which is where they were trying to be successful in.
Can you expand on the importance of this? Because I know you and I have had some conversations about this topic. So let's expand on it for the audience.
So when you think about from the aspect, I'll just use my vertical, which is financial services, solutions are getting more and more complex. And at the same time, customers' business models are changing. You can look at the mortgage rate industry right now, just because as interest rates went up, 6-7%. That kind of changes a lot of things from a commercial real estate side, as well as a home loan side. And if you think about banks, the majority, about 50% of their income comes from loans, right? So understanding their business model and understanding how you can complement that or help them alleviate some type of risk to their overall business, because you, again, know the trends that are happening because you've been following up on them. And then knowing the technology that's making headway and can add value to the organization, or talk about the technology that they already have that they might not be leveraging a certain feature. Perfect example, I can talk about, I was using Microsoft, for example. Their collaboration suite can do pretty much anything, but some people don't even turn it on, or they just don't know that it's even there, right? And then a person like myself, who is certified in Microsoft, even though I work at Docusign, can tell me, hey, have you thought about this feature? Because we can integrate in that, and it will help you from this type of operational expense, which will affect revenue in this way.
That is how you build trust with your customers, and that's how you articulate value. And actually, I was doing a presentation the other day to a sales community on what the role of solutions consulting actually is, and was discussing a lot of this subject matter expertise, right? And being able to have a perspective and build trust. And as you had mentioned a couple times in your career journey, and even that example, staying up to speed on what's happening in the industry will help you build credibility and have a point of view in those sales conversations. And I think sometimes we get so focused on our technology and like what box we live in that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Subject matter expertise within just industry knowledge allows you to create champions within the organization that will speak up on your behalf, because you're actually adding value to them. Because sometimes, as you know, most people that, their jobs, they're kind of just narrow focus. Again, going back to what we're talking about being prepared and proactive. Some people just narrow focus, and they need individuals like us to come in and say, hey, I know you're focusing on your job, but have you took a step back and look at the bigger picture and see what's going on? Because the saying, it's sometimes difficult. People can't see the forest when they're sitting in front of the tree, right?
I love it. And I think one of my favorite things about a solutions team is the innovation and the art of the possible that can come out of a team and of an organization. And that's how you have real business transformation. Chris, we've talked a lot about things that you've done and situations you've encountered, but I'm curious about what tactical ways are you staying ready? Like, how are you making sure you're always on top of your game?
So some tactical ways is this is one thing that I preach to people on my team is focus on a career, right? So think about career, it's really like, it's about enablement. For me, myself, I take advantage of things like education reimbursement. If there's $5,000 that they provide, I'm going to use all $5,000 to learn and enhance and enable my skill set to one, make me more impactful within that organization, but also grow my brand and grow my skill set. If I decide to choose to look other places, I have that value. Another thing is I read various articles. LinkedIn is very good at that. So I just look and try to understand different trends specific to my vertical. But also at times I do kind of go outside of my vertical because sometimes you'll see like security is a topic that they don't talk about, but there's a specific area of security that does align back to, for me, the financial industry because I have the rules and regulations. And I think one of the best things I would say is that the ability to, having conversations with my business partners, right? So looking at, customer success, working with them, working with my NDR team, working with my AE team, working with my RVP, working with, even the AVP in all organizations. Because at the end of the day, it's your book of business and you have to understand how everybody touches it. So you're getting proactive because you're learning everybody's role and responsibility. So therefore, you can strategically figure out how you're going to be successful or create a business plan or go-to-market plan for your specific sales opportunities.
Chris, that just gave me a light bulb moment. When was it that you realized how important all those other stakeholders were in terms of staying on top of your game? Because understanding their motivations, what's important to them, only makes us better at our jobs.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that because I learned about that when I got my MBA. So that was where I was looking at the tree and what the MBA did kind of made me step back and look at the forest. So I totally understood where and what I needed to do as far as who I need to align myself with, aka focusing on brand, so B, focusing on value, and then allowing me to, again, move forward within my career. And that's actually how I got in pre-sales, because that MBA thought process got me into that Cisco sales program. And so that started my whole sales career.
I'm glad that you learned that early because I don't think that I did. I'm open and honest about these types of things. And that's why in our new Leadership Elevate program, we have 2 sections around stakeholder management and understanding these folks, because I think it just makes a world of difference when you start to understand other people's perspective and problem solving and how they're approaching things to make us more effective in our jobs. Because let's face it, sales is more complicated than ever right now. Buying is more complicated than ever. And there's so many things that we're asking of SEs and AEs and all these teams. So staying up to speed on these things is really important to be able to do a good job.
I'm a firm believer on being a seeker of knowledge and also passing that knowledge on. The last thing I want somebody to do is run into a brick wall when I have the answer for them. The goal, but I always have to ask. If they run into a brick wall, they got to help somebody else if they know the answer. So it's kind of almost like train the trainer. And that's kind of like the poem Lift As You Climb, right? As you climb, you're bringing somebody along with you. And again, that builds trust. You're enabling, and then you're going to be more successful in the role.
I'm writing that quote down, as you climb, bringing someone with you, because I think it's really important. I think a lot of times people lose sight of that. A couple things that you've mentioned is really around learning. I have this philosophy, and I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I continue to say this, is that the world is evolving around us. We need to evolve with it. And I tell people all the time who come to the PreSales Collective that say, hey, I don't know if I need this. I've been doing this for a long time. Well, everything is changing around you, right? We just went through a pandemic. There's so many trends that alter our day to day that what we learned 5-10 years ago, we have to relearn. The concept that we believe internally in our team of PreSales Collective, PreSales Academy is being lifelong learners. So how do you continue to be that lifelong learner and continue to have an emphasis on learning? Because I've heard that as a theme throughout your answers today.
A lot of it stems from my father, right? He was a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. I'm a member also. And one thing I was taught at a young age is always to be a seeker of knowledge. So that's kind of the one thing that pushes me in that direction.
Seeker of knowledge. That's something I think we all need to be able to do. One of the things that you mentioned to me previously is, you've been in technology for 21 years and this concept of staying relevant. is really important. And so that's a concept that you brought up to me. So I want to unpack that with you. What does staying relevant mean after 2 decades in technology?
It goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, be hungry and humble. At the same time, make sure, again. So when I say stay ready to get ready, there's a lot of different other components that come with that. The next one I want to highlight is like your brand and your network. Having the ability to have relationships with other people in other organizations kind of gives you a holistic view of what's going on when you think about the industry trends. So for myself, I have quarterly meetings with other leaders in different organizations, for example, ServiceNow, Microsoft, IBM, Red Hat. I have a lot of friends that are AWS, but I have those quarterly calls just to make sure I'm up to date, knowing what's going on in their world, because it ultimately will affect mine. And obviously I tell them what I'm doing, and that's how it adds value back to them. That's one of the things, that helps you really stay ready, because you have people that are, sometimes you're working in the same accounts and don't even know it. And so you might not know about a project that you can align yourself to, or they might see an opportunity where they can help you. So that's one of the things, again, when I say stay hungry and humble, and, really it's all about your network. It's about who knows you, not about who you know. And that's one of the things, because if you think about it, it's really, from a network perspective, there's kind of like 3 tiers. You have tier 1 is the person who you know. Tier 2 is a person who gets referred by you. Then there's tier 3 where people actually are seeking out you because, again, you're a subject matter expert and your brand is there because you stayed ready to get ready and improving yourself.
I like that, Chris. And actually, Cindy Goodwin-Sack wrote an article really about hard connections and soft connections, right? Which essentially, like, I know you, but you know someone else that you could introduce me to, and kind of keeps that ball rolling on the concept of knowledge and learning. And what you all mentioned about talking to other leaders at other tech companies is like our entire premise of PreSales Collective, right? Like, we really fundamentally believe that you should be talking to other people that are in this job. So we're not all reinventing the wheel. We can start figuring out standards. We can start figuring out like what great looks like. And I think that for too long, we've just continued to stay too silo.
That's one of the challenges with most tech companies, right? Especially sometimes with startups, is that they're reinventing the wheel and they're not leveraging best practices. So think about smarter companies, like look at the ones who already hit 5 billion and above. And then if you ever notice, 5 billion is always the target mark that kind of makes you a sustainable company. And a lot of companies don't get there. But again, they're not leveraging the same model. IBM has the same, Red Hat has the same model, Microsoft, AWS, Salesforce, they all have the same model. But to your point, because certain leaders are in silos, they're not having those conversations, they're not being as successful as they could be.
Well said. And, I think sometimes group thing starts to creep in, right? Actually, Peter Polizzi, who's at OneTrust, was previous at Splunk, said something to me once that really resonated with me. And he said that when you have a group of individuals who've been really successful at what they've done for a long period of time, it's hard to affect change. It's hard to be able to say we should do things differently. And I think that's what's happened in some big organizations, and it's actually hurt them in the long run. But it's just kind of the nature of the beast in software right now. But I'm glad you brought up that perspective. Chris, one of the things that I wanted to tap into, because I know that you have some passion here when it comes to staying relevant, is internship programs. Can you expand maybe your experience there?
Internship programs, and for me, is always a way to talent pipeline. But again, me being an African-American male, I also look at it from an area to get more diverse pipeline in, because you're seeing the numbers, right? More diversity, whether it's like race, studies, economic background, companies perform like 30% better if you think about that. So for me, internships are very important. One thing we've done here at Docusign, when George Floyd happened, my AVP, Leah McTiernan, she's been on your shows a couple of times. She came to me and asked me, what could we do? And I said, the thing is, we have to give people opportunities, because if you don't give people opportunities, they're never going to make it. And so we worked out to create a SE internship program. And she worked in conjunction with Lauren Eldoff at the time, who was our chief revenue officer. We created a program that allowed us to now brought in 4 interns. They were very well. 2 of them got hired on, and it's not going to be a reoccurring program. So we have interns in right now that are being successful within Docusign. And again, diverse candidates, bringing a diverse pool of people, and kind of going back to the point of like how you stay relevant. Well, you got to be relevant with the people that are around you, which I think is the younger generation, because they're doing things that we didn't do. For example, TikTok. I didn't know about that until my niece was like 5. I was like, what is TikTok? Luckily, she told me. So when I was speaking about it, I was ahead of the curve. So people didn't know it until I said it. So therefore, I look like the subject matter expert. even though I don't do anything on TikTok, but the fact is I know the relevance of it, I understand the business model of it, and I understand, the value that it brings to not only just people and potentially even organizations.
I really appreciate that answer and want to give a shout out to Diamond Allen, who was actually an intern when he was on the PreSales Collective webinar. I know he got a full-time job. I got to meet him in San Diego at the local event. So shout out to him for being a success in that internship program.
He was actually, one of the first ones. He hit my Munzer. So those are two amazing young men.
As we're kind of getting to the end of the podcast, I think this is an important subject to talk about a little bit more, because one of the things at the PreSales Collective that we've really been trying to highlight is bringing more diversity into the profession. As you mentioned, the data and the statistics are there about the impact that diversity has on organizations. And the reality of the pre-sales profession is that it's predominantly male and predominantly white male. And as a white male, father of a daughter, I'm trying to play my role in trying to help the diversity of the profession. And as you mentioned, we're truly trying to put a focus on that with our career launch program, right? Where we've had sometimes over 50% women in those cohorts. And so this is really important to the future of this profession. And one of the things that we were talking about before we started recording was this idea that sales and engineering are two words that are deterrents to bring people in. So can you talk to us about your perspective on that, especially as it relates to bringing in diverse talent into this profession?
So I would say sales is just a deterrent. Inherently, people don't like to be sold, but they love to buy. So that's a deterrent from a personal, emotional perspective. They don't want to be sold, so they don't want to do something that they don't want to do to somebody else. And then the other component, the engineering component, is that it scares people away because sometimes they don't feel they have the aptitude to do the job. And that was true back in the day when people were coding and things of that nature. But now as we move away from, customization to configuration, the technology is relatively easy to learn. You just have to have the determination and put in the work. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, because people stop automatically saying, I don't have an engineering background. Well, guess what? You can learn the technology. You can learn anything. If you can learn a lyric to a song, you can definitely learn. Like, you just have to hear the song multiple times, right? Just like you have to learn the technology multiple times. That's how you're going to do it. But that is a deterrent. That component that if you see like, hey, we're looking for an engineering degree, you're going to lose at least 50% of your candidates, honestly. And especially if you're looking for diversity, you're going to probably lose like 70%, because they don't even really understand what a sales engineer is, and they don't like sales. But we're not selling, right? We're consulting people on their business and how we can help them impact various business outcomes, whether it's revenue creating or, operating expense savings. So that's kind of the thought process around that. But again, to your point, it has to change.
So I'm curious, as you and the Docusign team are looking to bring more diversity, especially Black and brown folks, into this profession, how are some of those conversations going when they see sales or solutions and engineering? How do those conversations go to let them know that this is a path for them?
It's not about the title. It's about the value that that individual is going to bring to your organization and the skill sets they're going to learn while you're there. So that's how you compete with things like, I don't know if I'm a good fit for the job, but you're good at speaking. You're good at talking. We can help improve that. We also can add on these extra layers that's going to help you with your career. That's how you kind of have those conversations to get that talent to say, you know what, I can't apply for this. But even more importantly, leadership has to honestly do more. If you want diverse talent, you have to go look for it. You can't just rely on your HR business partner to do that. I remember I had a conversation with one person, and you heard this before. They say, well, we don't know where the talent is. Well, I can rattle off multiple different conferences that have the talent, but you're just not represented. And that's not just as a technology industry as a whole. Some people do it better than others. But again, that's really the biggest challenge, that if you really want change, you have to take it by the reins yourself and push for it.
Agreed. And it's not easy. It takes energy, it takes effort, and it takes intention.
And consistency. Let's say you go to a historically Black college and you want to recruit, but this is your first time there. How are they going to trust you that you'll take care of the people that have put 4 years in under their alma mater? And were you actually going to just come to build a relationship, but actually with career development, meaning not coming in and staying as an individual contributor, but actually putting them on a career path to be a leader within an organization. Conversations about sponsors, right? Not mentors, but sponsors who are going to actually be that person to be that advocate for somebody in the other room. That's what these colleges are looking at. And that's where we have to understand how do you build that relationship and that trust? And that just comes with consistency.
It's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up. That's pretty awesome. Chris, this has been a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. I've really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad we got to meet in person. And one thing I want to highlight is that you mentioned brand and brand value. At the Chicago event, you mentioned to me, I'm looking to get my brand out there. I'm looking to do more in the community. How do I get involved? How do I get engaged? So I want to just thank you for that. And thank you for joining me on the podcast, because I think that that's inspirational to a lot of folks who want to get more involved, but they just don't know how. And all you had to do was ask, and it opened an opportunity. Glad to have you on the podcast. And I know that people will be reaching out to you to get your thoughts, get your perspective, and hopefully we'll see you around the community a bit more.
Definitely. I really appreciate the time, and looking for the next event.
All right, Chris, see you next time. All right, PreSales Collective, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Talking to Chris was just a real conversation. You know, a lot of things that we talked about, we weren't necessarily planning on. The discussion just went where it did. And I really love hearing Chris's perspective on this as a career and treating it like a career and not like a job. And he talked about Workforce 3.0. I really like that perspective about how the role of the solutions team has continued to shift and evolve from just pointing and clicking to value orientation and real subject matter expertise. Because this is something that we talk about on the podcast and throughout the PreSales Collective all the time, is that you have to be a subject matter expert to build trust with your customers. You hear it all the time, trust, trust, trust. But the reality is that this is the most important aspect of sales today. And the data shows it. And hearing Chris talk about how he stays relevant, how he stays up to speed on technology, how he builds continuity with his stakeholders, both internal and external, is amazing and really fantastic advice for all of us, because we just sometimes get caught in our hamster wheel, right? We get caught in the continual cycle of doing what we've done over and over again because it's what we've done well. And we have to continue to reinvent ourselves and continue to stay ready, because the world is evolving around us and we need to evolve with it. One of the things that I really liked that Chris highlighted was, as he climbed, bringing somebody with him. And Chris has been a fantastic advocate for Black and brown professionals breaking into pre-sales. And he's been involved in the internship programs and really, as the leader of the Bold organization, helping bring diversity into this amazing profession. So I definitely suggest reaching out to Chris in the PreSales Collective Slack if you want to pick his brain and get his perspective on how we can continue to bring diversity into this profession. All right, PreSales Collective, thank you so much for tuning in today. Your support means so much. Don't forget to log into our member hub to stay up to date on all the latest webinars, workshops, blogs, and other content around the community. I also hope you'll make time to connect with your fellow solutions professionals through our Connections platform or in our Slack community. As always, I'll see you around the community, and I'll see you next week.